Now, we are ready to roll with our Friday Five here in studio. We've shuffled some of the seats around, but I can assure you that will not affect the quality of the programming. Mr. Gilstrap, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
He's in the Mike Heights seat now. You were in your own seat for a little while.
I was, but now that's the Larry Schultz seat.
That is now the Larry Schultz seat. Lawrence, good morning to you.
Great to be here. Thanks.
In the Bill Stubblefield seat is David Valente.
Hey, good morning. I'm actually much higher than I was in the first segment.
Yes, that's the other part.
You kind of qualify that a little bit.
I mean, my
You did
reputation
have
as
a
a
break.
libertarian.
You didn't go in the restroom.
No.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
in a physical plane.
Elevated status. Yeah. And in his own seat, Michael Carl,
Great to be with everybody.
senior member of our crew, predates even the host. What about 1999, 2000, Mike?
Yeah, it
All
was
right.
before 2000.
Yeah. You get your 25th anniversary wristwatch?
No.
No? You missed that? That's out front.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, just check out one of the drawers in the
But he doesn't have a date on his watch, so he didn't know to check.
So who knew? Right? Mr. Ferretti via telephone?
Yeah, good morning. Proof that our host has a compulsive disorder. He has assigned seating in the studio.
I do.
Interesting.
And it's not so much that it's obsessive compulsive so much as it is that through sheer exhaustion of not getting enough sleep, I need to revert back to habits in order to make things work in an orderly fashion. So that's why everybody has to sit where they sit.
Despite the fact that years of therapy finally cured you of those habits, now you're like regressing? Is that what you're telling me?
There's actually haven't been years of therapy other than what I conduct on my own brain cells when I can't sleep at night. There should be years of therapy, but there haven't been
that
yet.
part.
My wife will assure you there should have been many years of therapy a long time ago. Mr. Ferretti leads off our Friday Five here, and Joe, the stage is yours, sir.
Well, Rob, I certainly put a topic out there for discussion, which is kind of wide-ranging, so we all have a chance to riff a little bit about the West Virginia legislature. And the question I posed was, pick out one issue that you believe is a must-do for this West Virginia legislature this session. What an issue or an item that you know that the legislature just has to tackle to get things moving in the right direction in West Virginia. So I'm going to start off with my issue, which has to do with child welfare. While we're soon going to be hearing about the Baby Olivia video again and whether or not that's compulsory viewing in our schools, let me tell you about another Olivia. She's a resident of Martinsburg. At age 8 through about age 11, she was reporting that she was sleeping on the floor in her home where she lived with her sister and her father. She described cockroaches running up and down the walls and pretty much unsanitary conditions. At age 13, she was impregnated by an adult man who had groomed her over the course of about 2 or 3 years. She gave birth to a premature baby at age 14. Also at age 14, she got into a horrible fist fight with her sister, and finally the state of West Virginia steps in and decides that she needs to be removed from the home. Now, she doesn't go to a foster home, of course, because we know that placement is such a problem in West Virginia. She goes to a juvenile detention center, the Vicki Douglas Juvenile Center, and then she bounces from one institution to another for the next few years. West Virginia is facing a federal lawsuit presently over the foster care system and the over-reliance of the state on institutionalizing these kids who are removed from the home. We institutionalize kids at 3 times the national average. The lawsuit alleges these kids are simply housed in these institutions where they are prone to further abuse, and believe it or not, they're administered sedatives, sometimes hidden in their food, just to keep them calm so that the people who work in the institutions don't have a difficult task of maintaining behavioral problems. A number of these kids, like Olivia, right now are ballooning in terms of going into the state system. Just last year alone, there was an 8% increase in the number of kids requiring some sort of placement outside their normal home. Another study recently done in West Virginia revealed that child abuse related to parents who are legal guardians who are abusing drugs, we're at 4 times the national average for suffering from that kind of abuse. So help for these kids is desperately needed. The ecosystem for rehabilitation in West Virginia is severely lacking, as we know. There's a shortage of mental health professionals. And in our school districts, the 55 county school districts, not one of them has the requisite number, the recommended number of school psychologists on staff to deal with these kids who have a lot of problems. And of course, we know about the thousands of kids who are awaiting foster care placements. And so it's a vexing problem that the legislature has to deal with. The canary in the coal mine now is in the court system. Judge Sweeney, who's a judge over in, I think it's the 3rd Judicial Circuit in Ritchie and Dodgers County, he entered an order 2 weeks ago compelling Department of Human Services, their agency officials who work in Charleston, to show up in his courtroom yesterday at 9 a.m. to be assigned cases that the CPS workers in those counties cannot handle because there's too few of them and they're overburdened with the number of cases they're handling. He can see the problem. He actually entered a court order with the penalty being contempt if you don't show up, so that these agency officials could actually be working in the field. This is where we are in West Virginia in terms of child protective services. So I believe one of the issues that this legislature must do is devote the time and resources to fix this problem that has been, frankly, kicked around for the last 7 to 10 years, if my memory serves. It is something that is imperative because we are either going to profit by our efforts to help these kids or we're going to pay for it down the road. And I fear that we're on the track right now to have a lot of problems down the road if we don't deal with this now. So that's my issue I think the legislature has to tackle. I would invite the panelists to either discuss that or maybe there are other issues that they think the legislature just has to do.
Joe, I would ask you, have you seen any evidence that the legislature is looking into these issues for this legislative session?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I talked to Mike Hornby just the other day, complimenting him, of course, about his appearance on his own radio show, and he did give me some hope that there was going to be work done in this area. And I saw where Roger Hanshaw also was quoted as saying that they are going to get down to work on these issues. But I've heard this before. In fact, last year it was stated that this was an imperative. They come out with a couple pieces of legislation. They broke up the Department of Human Services, as we know. But as Judge Sweeney said in his order, the breaking up of that agency has not resulted in any fix for the lack of people and the lack of resources to deal with this problem in West Virginia. So, unfortunately, the legislature, in a time when we're looking at a $400 million deficit, they're going to have to write some checks to get this fixed. And I don't know if the wherewithal there is to do it.
Is the fix strictly money to add more people, Joe, or is there a restructuring of the way these cases are handled? Is that the greater fix?
Well, look, there's 2 counties in West Virginia right now, Lewis and Upshur County. They have 1 CPS worker for the whole county. So you got to hire more people. You got to recruit people. And, of course, you got to pay them a wage that incentivizes them to take that job. It's a difficult job to go into people's homes and discuss removing a child. I can't imagine how difficult that is. But people are willing and trained and experienced to do it, but you're going to have to pay them and incentivize them to take those jobs. And right now, it's apparent in West Virginia we're not doing that.
Let's go to John Gilstrap first. John, your thoughts on Joe's observations and then thoughts of your own.
Actually, the two are related. What we do with children here in West Virginia is, I think, shameful. I don't pretend to have the solution, and I think that's part of the problem, Joe, is that I don't think anybody has the imagination yet in Charleston to figure out how to solve this problem, and the other one is the overall education system in the state. We're last in everything, and we talk about trying to fix the education system, but there's no accountability. I don't know how many interviews we have done on education issues here in the studio, and everybody's working very hard. Everybody's absolutely committed to fixing the problem, except, nope, I can't do that. The school board doesn't have the authority to do the curriculum issues. The superintendent doesn't have the authority to do certain things. To me, it all comes down to Charleston. There's something about the fundamental construction of the education system in West Virginia that needs to be fixed. My thought is we need to reconsider the whole top-down nature of the education system here. I think it's absurd to have a state school board with 9-year terms and to determine what individual counties are going to do. It's a foster care issue. It's a discipline issue. It's a drug issue. It's an attendance issue. It's like a Gordian knot where so many things are broken, and the common denominator out of this is the children. And I don't know how to find that voice, and I think it's such a difficult problem, and it's such a complicated problem that it's hard for the politicians to actually talk about it for more than a few minutes at a time.
Michael Carl.
Well, this just one more example of how inadequate the government service and the use of government funds is and has been and will continue to be if it isn't fixed. And during Joe's introduction, I heard the word profit, and it suggests, I don't know if he meant this, but I think you create private sector incentives with clear, monitoring and testing, that makes sure that it's working, and that, and I'm not ready to design that arrangement, but those concepts I think are part of the answer, or are the answer.
And then from your perspective, Mike, what would you like the legislature to tackle that is of interest to you this year? That was the second part of Joe's equation. What do you think is the most important thing the legislature should work on this year? Unrelated to anything Joe said.
Continuing to reform and reduce the income taxes, and spend money more efficially.
And in the past, you've introduced different plans, including the Fair 55 plan. Would you want to see them adopt some of those items?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, and can you rattle off a few of those again?
Well, there's all kinds of aspects to it, but it really is to reduce the income tax rates, but the other side of the coin is to lower the government spending. Big time.
And you had a sales tax approach as well, did you not?
Yeah. That was more of a self-imposed tax. Excuse me. When you're buying something, you need to pay a sales tax, but I think the rate can be lowered. In the exemption system needs a lot of work.
You wanted to broaden the sales tax base as to what can be taxed.
Right.
All right, Mr. Valente.
Yeah, I completely agree with Joe in that we definitely need to fix the foster care system. Really everything that relates to children in the state of West Virginia really needs to be a focus at this point. Not just foster care, but education. Again, we've done a disservice to our teachers and to our children by continuing to, have common sense things like having locality pay for these border counties and having the ability to control your own curriculum from the local community rather than having it dictated from on high. That needs to be a focus. But the other thing that really needs to be a focus is we got to get our fiscal house in order. We are we're in a new administration that has turned off the spigots on a couple vital programs here in West Virginia. And we can't be sure that the federal government is going to give us money. And a lot of people here are surviving just on the grace of Uncle Sugar because, whatever the Trump administration decides to do, West Virginia is going to have to backfill if that gets turned off. And I don't think this state's in a position to do that. In fact, I'm sure I'll bet good money on that the state is not in a position to backfill what is going to be taken away by the Trump administration in the names of reduction and efficiency. So a really hard look at our numbers, hard look at all of our programs to see what is working, what is not working, allocating those resources to what is working, allocating resources to where the places like foster care to get more people in the door to be workers, to be the CPS workers, to fund our education system. I know the PEIA is a massive concern for a lot of state employees. There are things to focus on, but I've got a feeling that we're way too focused on naming a knob after Donald Trump and trying to figure out what's in a kid's underwear.
That's just
We're gonna leave that hanging.
Joe. That didn't help, Joe. That didn't help.
In some cases,
so to speak.
You guys aren't helping. Not helping at all.
If you've ever raised kids, that's a surprise you just don't want to see.
Yeah, usually after a little while, it's not very surprising anymore. There's only a limited range of options,
Just
right?
not helping. Yeah. I am told about $20 billion is spent by the state of West Virginia on an annual basis. $5 billion of that is locally generated through state revenues, 15 through the feds. That includes the wash-through payments that they do for social welfare programs and highway money as well. In conversations with those elected to state-level offices, I have discovered that the belief is that President Trump won't hurt us. He loves West Virginia. We voted for him.
the leopards will never eat my face.
But this is the belief that's been echoed back to me by statewide elected officials. They have faith that President Trump will not hurt West Virginia or hurt funding because the state voted for him.
Your miles may vary.
So this is the way, and when I've asked, including the finance chair in the Senate, Jason Barrett, if there's been any conversations at all on how to deal with the federal spigot being tightened a little bit, the answer was, I'm too busy dealing with other things. I can't deal with hypotheticals right now. I can understand that to an extent, but it does seem that there should be at least a little conversation of what do we do if this billion is turned off, and that's not happening right now. Larry Schultz.
Yes. First of all, I think Joe's right. This is the most important thing facing us because it literally, along with the schools, is our future. The children are the future. That's inescapable. Having said that, to go along with another issue that's very important is the pending, as I understand it, cuts to Medicaid. In West Virginia, the WVU hospital system and the other smaller hospital systems that operate throughout the state and run little hospitals in various places are facing a real problem if there are any serious cuts to Medicaid that comes to West Virginia at all. And that is because, according to an article that I read, and I think I posted it to the other folks from the Dominion Post, the people who run these hospital systems say that 30% of West Virginians are on Medicaid, and that 75% of the revenue of these smaller hospital systems comes from Medicaid, Medicare, and PEIA, federal program, state program, with a state that has a $400 million budget deficit, according to our new governor. If there is any serious cut to Medicaid, you are going to see hospital bankruptcies in this state. And what are we going to do about the nursing homes? I am sorry that I disagree with Mr. Barrett, but if nursing homes start closing down, they are similarly and perhaps even more extremely funded by entities that are not West Virginia government, but entities like the federal government. If they start closing down, that's going to be a crisis of unimaginable proportions for a lot of families. If you suddenly lose the nursing home where your mother, who's suffering a terminal illness or dementia, has to come home, and you have to figure out some way to get a private caretaker in there and find the money to pay them. Otherwise, you've got to quit your job and take care of her yourself. You're talking about something that could wreck the economy, such as it is, in this state for a long time. So that is also, it may not be more important than what Joe was talking about, a very important thing. I have not heard a single legislator from the party that controls this entire state, nor our governor, nor our senators, nor our congresspeople say one word about this publicly as these proposals are being made. Shelley Moore Capito, to give her the credit that is due, said something about a tax on the National Institutes of Health and how we have research institutions, shorthand for WVU, is a research hospital. They cut the National Institutes of Health budget, and that's going to be a real problem for WVU, even if they don't cut Medicaid. However, cutting Medicaid means the whole business is probably going to crater, and it won't matter if you cut the NIH funding, because we won't have a WVU hospital system. So that's a big problem. It's partly a federal problem, maybe largely a federal problem, but the people that represent us in the state legislature, these are their constituents who are going to get slammed if this happens. And so somebody better start talking publicly about the problem with these proposals from the feds and the problem in our state with PEIA.
Joseph Ferretti comes back to you for the final thought.
Yeah, Larry, I agree with what you're saying there, too. I think that's an important issue. But something you said on this show, perhaps maybe over a year or two ago, about how these kids that are in a state of neglect are our future EMTs and first responders. They're the people who are going to be our teachers and working at Procter & Gamble and maybe even becoming professionals. The population of those kids that go into those jobs is going to be shrinking because so many of them are damaged and have so much baggage that they're dragging around. And the social services that they would rely on to rehabilitate them and get them on the right path are sorely lacking. So while we can invest hundreds of millions of dollars in a Nucor plant to get 800, 900 jobs in a certain part of West Virginia, we have a whole swath of kids across the state that are suffering in need of help and are our future. And if we don't invest there, similarly to what we invest in places like Nucor, we're going to pay a dear price for this down the road. And it's only going to make the problems in our schools worse, and it's going to make reliance upon the state a lifetime for some of these kids, as opposed to just something that occurs in their formative years. So I'm hoping that the legislature recognizes that and prepares to invest.
Joe, thank you. Good leadoff segment once again as we take our top of the hour break here. We are the Friday Five Strong here today with John Gilstrap of the Mike Height seat. Mr. Gilstrap, you'll be doing this throughout the course of the legislative session.
Happy to be here.
Mr. Carl in his own chair. It literally says that on his chair.
It does.
It does, yeah. No, it doesn't. Mr. Larry Schultz.
Great to be here.
Via telephone, Joseph Joey Torts Ferretti.
I'm in my assigned chair.
Yes, you are. And in the Bill Stubblefield seat with issue number 2, Mr. David Valente.
Hey, good morning. So, it's what they would say for our show is a very target-rich environment as far as topics go. But I'm going to hit one that's very near and dear to my heart. As a federal employee, we've seen a lot of things happen over the last. It feels a lot longer, but it's only been a month. So let's talk about some of the things that have happened within the realm of federal employment. So very quickly after Trump gets in office, all federal employees receive an email that says, "Called fork in the road," coming from some server that we're not even sure where that server was located, saying essentially, "We're giving you the option to resign, and you'll continue to get paid until October 1, and then you will no longer be a federal employee." That, of course, gets challenged in the courts and everything like that. But the problems just with that email alone were, why were federal employees getting emailed from a non-government server? We raked Hillary Clinton over the coals for having servers inside of her closet. Why are we getting emailed from non-government servers? Doge then starts accessing U.S. Treasury records, Social Security data, recently IRS data. We've had, in the name of auditing some of this stuff, we're not using actual auditors. We're using interns and computer hackers. Doesn't sound like a way to do an audit. We fired veterans suicide hotline employees for a group of people that really pride itself on being patriots, or fake-triots as I call them, and supporting veterans programs. That is a critical need. The 22 a day statistic still is there.
Suicides victims in the military.
22 a day. We fired 350 National Nuclear Security Administration personnel. It feels like the government, or the Doge, is just flipping off switches to see what happens. There's no rhyme or reason. We've now realized, we don't have anybody monitoring our nuclear sites and nuclear weapons, so we're scrambling to rehire those folks. We fired the inspector generals, the people that will inspect if graft and misconduct are going on. I've taken part in many IG reports and discussed what's going on in our agency to make sure that we're on the up and up. So you're having grand upheavals within those auspices, and then we have the proposed firing of generals. And I always say when you get to a very critical point in your nation's history is when you start firing generals for no reason. Like I said, we're flipping switches right now. In fact, some of the people that took the fork in the road deal to resign at the end of the fiscal year were actually fired. They got an email days later saying, "Yeah, you're fired. Now we're going to have to rehire them back." Because that's just ripe for a lawsuit, but
can't hire them back though because it's a hiring freeze.
Yeah, we're in a hiring freeze. The purpose of this was to drive out employees, and I get want to reduce the federal workforce by 10%, and 4% took the fork in the road according to their numbers. I don't know if I trust them. The way that they're doing this is, and what you're going to see happen is that very skilled, either younger or older workers are going to leave the federal government because they have skills and either are in the retirement zone or they are skilled and can get hired in the private sector, which is great. If you can get hired in the private sector, that's great. You're going to have a lot of people with kind of in my boat that you're at not quite at retirement age, but you don't want to just give up because you've invested a lot of time in the career and you're trying to get to that retirement age, that are examining whether we're going to stay or are we going to get the tap on the shoulder to come to the office and bring your playbook. My question to you all, the way that things are going, the missteps we've seen, Trump or President Musk holding up a chainsaw at the CPAC event yesterday. Do you think that Doge will be successful long term, and how will it be? Will it raise the efficiency of government?
All right, Mr. Gilstrap.
The last question first, yes. I think it has to, and it will. But now backtrack on that. The one known factor out of all of this is that the United States is bleeding to death financially. We cannot sustain the rate of spending and the deficit, the interest on our
Debt.
on our debt exceeds the entire budget of the Defense Department and other departments. So what exists cannot continue. That's the given. Now, how do you fix it? The scalpel approach has always been promised. It's been tried ever since Reagan. Every administration has promised that we're going to cut waste in the government. It has never happened. So this approach, bringing a baseball bat into the crystal shop, it speeds things along. It puts the reduction at the focus of everybody's attention, certainly, and the simple speed of it all doesn't give the opposition time to come up with the parliamentary roadblocks to keep this from happening. So that is a strategy. Do I agree with the strategy? It's probably not the strategy I would have used to do it, but do I think it will be effective? Yes, and we're already seeing it. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal. I meant to pull it up today, and I didn't. It was in the Wall Street Journal yesterday that individual departments within the government are discovering billions of dollars in savings on their own in order to get ahead of this. So if this approach is triggering the savings that's essential, then yeah, I think it's a fine approach. As far as firing people is concerned, I want to be a little careful here because I know it affects individuals in this room and related people in this room. So, take it on principle, not personally. People get fired all the time. Government workers quit all the time. I was shocked to find out that people in the intelligence business, when they quit, they just, they give like a week's notice and they go away, and nobody takes their playbook at all. You just kind of, the institutional knowledge that they have just goes with them. So it's hard to muster. I think one of the reasons that Trump's popularity remains high through all of this, it's the government who, when shutting down the coal industry, or trying to shut down the fossil fuels industry, it was Joe Biden who said, well, just let them learn to code. Let them do something else. Just kind of, we don't care about you. And I'm not saying I don't care about the federal workers, but we will recover from this. We're going to lose good people with bad people. Absolutely. I believe there's a lot of very, very competent people in the federal government. I believe there are very competent people in the plant that I worked, where we had to lay off 40% of the people. It's just kind of the way it goes. So the slow approach has never worked. We'll see if the fast approach does, and I think it will.
Mike Carl.
Well, I have to first say I agree with virtually everything I just heard in the first comments. You can't. The criticism that we're hearing doesn't offer an alternative other than stop trying to make the government more efficient and save money. And there's going to be errors, and problems, but the goal is critical to pursue. And if there's some mistakes made, that's going to happen. But to go back and not do anything and to live with the federal government system that we've endured, for so long, particularly in the last 4 years, is a huge mistake. So I completely agree that in the long term, this aggressive effort, I think, will greatly benefit America, the people, and make its government far more efficient.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes. Very quickly, what I'm taking from this is that we have decided to take the president who in his last term ran the highest budget deficits in American history for 4 years and say, oh, yeah, he's the efficiency guy. He's going to balance everything up. Look.
You called Musk president or somebody did.
I called him
Yeah.
president.
And that's part of this problem. And to go back, there's one person in here, I think, who's ever worked in the role as a corporate auditor, and that's me. And I was in the oil industry, of all places. If you want to talk about some waste and abuse, there was a lot of it back in the 80s when I was doing this. Auditors have a special skill set that computer hackers don't just gain by accident, and tech bros, okay? We don't have auditors in there looking for the problem. That's why we're going through this meat cleaver, cutting people out like these folks for the Nuclear Security Agency, who they're now trying to hire back, but they can't find them. You know why? Because they kicked them off the federal government emails. And that was the only way they had of contacting them before. And so they're actually trying to hire back some of these nuke employees. So it is possible that you could have the right desire to reduce the federal budget deficit, but then hire a loon like the so-called President Musk, and he then hires other loons, and they go in and just make it worse. I believe that when people who voted for Donald Trump see that their mother's nursing home is going to close as a result of this ham-handed attempt to cut the federal budget, they're going to say, wait just a minute. I would urge everybody out there to call your elected officials at the state and federal level and ask them how in the world they expect West Virginia to survive without these programs. And how about if you hire somebody who actually understands how the government works?
Joe Ferretti.
I'm amazed that we can see what's happening here with these massive federal bureaucracies. And they are massive and they need to be trimmed. But to take these huge organizations and think that this group that the president has contracted this work out to can step in a matter of a week and decide who gets cut, who gets fired, what's their budget going to be down the road. I mean, the logic dictates that that's just not possible without some massive inefficiencies. And that's what I find ironic about the Department of Government Efficiency is we're finding out that they're firing people and then having to rehire them within a week. And they're scrambling to find these folks to bring them back because they have institutional knowledge that no other people have. I mean, is that efficient? And to think that they can come into these now they're going to tackle the Pentagon next, okay, which is the largest line item in the federal budget. I can't imagine that people think that this is possible, that they can come in and do this correctly. We've heard anecdotally how these federal workers get a 15-minute interview to basically argue for their job. I don't know how that's acceptable and how we think that's ultimately going to work for the benefit of the country. Yes, do the trimming and cutting, and yes, try to I'll use the vernacular, right-size some of these organizations, but do it in a thoughtful way. One thing we learned as a child is haste makes waste, and I suspect we're going to see a lot of waste, and we're going to see a lot of people going without services. And when people don't start getting their Social Security checks on time because we've cut the Social Security Administration and CMS and those folks who deal with that on a daily basis, we'll see some of the birds coming home to roost.
Final word goes back to you, David Valente.
Yeah,
make it a quick one.
There are actually ways to do this, and we just talked about the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense has failed several audits. There are roadmaps there of, hey, this is probably some areas that we need to investigate and cut. Listen to auditors and figure out, okay, when we do an audit and somebody fails it or we identify waste and inefficiency there, let's cut it. Let's defund some of these unneeded weapons programs that we are doing as make work programs for some influential senator or congressman. There are ways to do things. End the concept of use or lose, because September is a spending spree in the federal government because people know that if they don't spend their money, they're not going to get as much money the next year. Incentivize bringing money back into the federal government at the end of the year. That would be a way to bring more efficiency. Just cutting off things, ending contracts, and then having to bring contracts in. You don't know how inefficient that stuff is. It's just like when we do a government shutdown. We lose so much efficiency just from the restarting of federal government because contractors have lost their access to VA systems or whatever department systems that they're involved with. It's a hugely inefficient thing. So next time we start seeing a thing about government shutdown, don't jump up and down and say we're going to save money. We never save money on government shutdowns.
Issue 3 goes to John Gilstrap. We have 6.5 minutes.
Which really isn't enough time to do any of the topics I wanted to do, so I want to continue on this one a little bit.
Please do.
Joe, when you say there are appropriate ways to do this, you're absolutely right. And when you say we need to take our time to do this, in a perfect world, you're absolutely right. We're talking about a political world, and we're talking about a hatred on the left for the incumbent that goes beyond normal political hatred. As a practical matter, President Trump has maybe 250 days in his presidency to make this difference happen. After that, his own party will start to lose political courage because we're going to start into the next election season for the House and for a third of the Senate. So we don't have time to take the time. That's the problem. From a political standpoint, the clock is ticking. It's ticking very, very quickly. So the most things that can be broken in the shortest period of time is the only way to have the impact on the budget. David, you talk about, you're absolutely right in terms of changing use or lose and that, but that's billions of dollars. We're talking about hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars that somehow need to be cut. And it ain't all in the workforce. I mean, you can't, if you fire everybody in the federal government, you still haven't made that big a dent. So we're talking about
just to give you a fact on that, the federal payroll is 4.3% of the budget. So if you fired everybody, you'd save 4.3%.
Right. And then, so it's the programs that they work on is where the real money is. So if you shake things up hard enough, you, by definition, find a different way. We'll find out whether it's the more efficient way, but we'll certainly have to find a different way.
All right, Mr. Valenti, I'll go right back to you since he was looking at you last.
The reason why government is slow is that people in the past have done things, whether it's bribery, whether it's kickbacks. We have a lot of regulations that slow the process, and that adds money to the process, that adds time to the process. By stripping out a lot of those things, and I know that Trump's first term he did the 2-for-1 regulation deal. Every regulation you add to the Federal Register, you have to take 2 out. That was a good thing. Although experienced government workers knew to pull which 2 regulations to pull out that really didn't impact the day-to-day operations. There are methods to do this that aren't going to possibly destroy West Virginia nursing homes, that aren't going to possibly destroy our ability to maintain our nuclear arsenal. Yes, you're right. You want to try and do this as fast as possible, but the thing is, this wasn't built in a day. This was built over 250 years. This and really it ramped up since the Wilson administration, really ramping the size and scope of federal government. It's not going to. You can't ramp it down. The main cost control is getting people in Congress who don't want to spend like drunken sailors.
We don't have those.
We don't have people with political courage to say do we really need this? Is this the most efficient use for our money? No, we have people like, I need to make sure that this gets back to my district so I get reelected in 2 years.
Which is why Doge is structured the way it is.
So the population of the country in the last 50 years has grown by 57%. Does anybody know what the population of federal employees has grown by in those same 50 years? Take a guess. Just throw a number out.
25.
Mike?
I have no idea.
Throw a number out.
40%.
David?
35%.
Larry?
Yeah, I'd say 20-25.
Joe Ferretti?
10%.
6.
Wow.
So you've been told that the federal workforce is a bloated, disgusting animal filled with people stealing from the taxpayers. I think it was Caroline Levitt who said they've been stealing from the taxpayers for how long it's time for them to stop. She wasn't talking about the government programs where there's waste, fraud, and abuse. She was talking about government employees. So while the population of the country has grown by 57% in 50 years, the population of the federal workforce has grown by 6%. So that includes adding the Department of Homeland Security, which was done under a Republican president, and the expansion of the Federal Department of Education, which was added under a Democratic president, Jimmy Carter.
So that's why I have I manage 62 programs.
Yeah. The next time my wife tells me that she has extra time to sit around and do nothing during the workday will be the first time in 27 years, because when I check with her, she gets project upon project upon project dumped on her to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure where all these federal employees are who are sitting around. As Larry Pack said, the rumors are in Parkersburg, we've got people working 3-4 jobs while they're supposed to be working for the federal government. I'm not sure where those people are. There's probably a couple that exist.
Have you been to the Martinsburg post office?
Well, that's going to be solved soon, because President Trump is going to dissolve the post office and put it under the Department of Commerce. So that'll solve all those problems. You'll be good there.
Really?
That's what that's what he said this morning.
If you don't have email, I would suggest that you get it soon.
That's what he said this morning. He's getting rid of all the heads of the post office boards of governors or whatever they're called, and he's going to assimilate them into the Department of Commerce.
The problem is the waste of money.
I agree.
Not the number of employees.
But that's not what's happening, Mike.
Not what they're doing.
That's my point in what I just said. But the solution is to fire the federal employees. That's what the solution's been.
Well, because for the moment they're getting away with it.
We got to go.
Until the courts.
We got to go. Issue number 3 after this. Or 4. And with issue number 4, attorney at law Larry Schultz.
Yes, people in West Virginia are starting to express alarm at the size of their Potomac Edison electric bills. Some of this is surely related to our relatively cold winter, but some of it is because of rate increases granted by our state's Public Service Commission. In a 70+% Trump state, is this West Virginians getting what they voted for? Has anyone heard of any local politician who is working on this? And please tell me who and what they have done.
All right. Well, who wants to go first on this one? This is, I think, an interesting, a bit of a challenge here. David, do you want to take it first?
Sure. My bill last month was $250. Its standard is in the low ones. So doubling. Yes, it is. Part of it is the colder weather that we had. Several days under 20 degrees, but really, it would not explain this. I don't heat my house to a super high level. I just throw on more clothes if I'm cold, or use a blanket. There are, and I'm hearing it because with my HOA, people in our community are seeing the same thing. Their bills are going to the $200s, $300 bills. If they have kids, it's getting out of control, and it would be nice to have more of an explanation of, who did what, and because not everybody pays attention to the Public Service Commission and their dictates. We just get a bill and all of a sudden it's double what we normally pay. I have not heard. When you posited this question, I did try and look it up online to see if there's anybody working on this issue. I don't see anything. I would love to see some politicians start to address this issue, because it is a pocketbook issue for a lot of people here in West Virginia. And I can afford it, but there are people who are not going to be able to afford their power bills because of these changes.
Mr. Ferretti.
Larry, have you seen the size of the lobbying groups in Charleston for the utility company?
Well, and I'd really like to see the size of the money that's changing hands, because
Yes.
every month that's a little bit of that is my money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the common theme now with these lobbying groups, and I don't cast aspersions specifically at the utility company because I don't know if they're doing this or not, but with a lot of lobbying groups down there is you either vote our way or we're going to primary you. That is a common refrain down there, and it has a lot of our legislators cowering in the corner, unfortunately. But it is ironic that in a state that's rich in certain resources that are involved in producing electricity, that West Virginia is paying some of the highest utility rates in the country. I don't know why. I'm not smart enough, or I've not studied the issue enough to understand or to suggest what's at foot here. But I do find that ironic, and I also wonder how long this can sustain, because in a state where it's an aging population on fixed incomes, as the utility bills continue to climb, people are going to be in a state of hardship. We used to talk about how they would trade food for medicine. Now we wonder if they're going to trade both of those items to have some heat during times when we have historically cold temperatures. So bottom line is it's something the legislature needs to look at, because the population deserves a look at that very critically in order to have the necessary funds to sustain.
Mr. Gilstrap.
We keep our house in the wintertime right around 65 maximum.
I'm surprised you're that high up.
Well, and at night we turn the heat off. So when we got our first, it's pretty big house, and when we got our first $600 electric bill in January, I sort of wrote it off to maybe it was Christmas lights and stuff, because we kind of do a lot of those. But they keep being that high. I don't understand how, especially when you consider that I keep my house in the summertime right around 68 or 70 degrees, and that's where we should be, getting hammered with electric bills, and we weren't. So I don't begin to understand. I think finding the nexus to Trump on this one is a bit of a stretch, but I have no idea how it's happening, and I know it's the buzz of their local social media outlets, but it's huge.
Mike Carl.
Well, first of all, let's don't overlook the impact of just general inflation. But I'm far less concerned about any rip-off and price gouging in this area, because of the regulatory environment that pricing comes out of. So I'm not concerned about this, and don't forget the impact of inflation.
So some regulation is good. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Chris Anders, who's a delegate, said that he wanted to get, in one of his postings, said he wanted to get rid of the Public Service Commission. Unelected, I think, bureaucrats is what he called them, who never met a price increase that they didn't approve.
But the trouble is that public utilities is basically a legalized monopoly, and you can't just let them do what they want.
Is that what would happen if you got rid of the PSC?
Well, if they're not regulated, if they can do if they can charge whatever levels and rates they want, then that's a serious problem. It's a monopoly, so it has to be overseen by government regulation.
Back to you, Larry.
I imagine a West Virginian out there, having listened to this show and following the news, saying to himself, when they send my poor mother home from the bankrupt nursing home and I have to care for her, how am I going to keep my house warm enough to assure her health?
You have a unique talent, Larry.
If that guy ain't out there, I'll eat your hat.
Issue number 5, Michael Carl.
I want to bring up, and this is a question. There's already been some criticism of our new governor, and the question is: do you think we're going to be better off that he's running things, or we're going to miss justice?
Interesting question here. Let me begin first with Larry Schultz on this one. Morrissey versus
Sure.
justice.
Well, we certainly won't miss injustice. We're going to get that from both of them. Okay. Sorry. Puns are like a natural thing with me.
We'll be right back after these messages.
But yeah, I have no reason to believe whatsoever that there will be any improvement, any noticeable improvement, as a result of Mr. Morrissey taking over for Mr. Justice. On the other hand, I also have no reason to think there's going to be a massive decline because the standard is pretty low. All the things that Joe was talking about in the very first question of this show happened under Justice. So if Morrissey's going to fix them, I might change my idea. But if he doesn't fix them, he's not dealing with the problems, and that's kind of what the governor is hired to do, deal with the problems.
Joe Ferretti.
Well, I sense some improvement in terms of how the governor's comporting himself. He's showing up for work, which is a good thing. Living in the mansion, showing up around the legislature, doing some executive type things, that Jim Justice failed to do while he was coaching girls basketball. But I think what I'd like to see from our new governor in terms of management style is I think he can quit playing the role of mini Donald Trump and drop the Trumpisms that he.
I don't think he's played a mini anything in his entire life there, Joe.
Well,
are you talking about Morrissey?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Morrissey.
He's not exactly mini either. I say that as someone who isn't himself.
My apologies.
No problem. I could do without that. The focus on DEI, which I don't suspect is a major problem in West Virginia. Let's focus on the things that we talked about during the show, which are of critical importance to the state and its long-term future. And I hope that he'll get around to focusing on that rather than some of the other silly stuff that he seems to want to engage in, at least on the stump or when he's speaking to us at the large. But overall, jury's way out yet on this cat, and I'm waiting to see what happens.
From Alert Berkeley Cemetery Road, 900 block shut down due to a traffic accident this morning. Mr. Gilstrap.
Again, I think it's very short, a few weeks, if that, into his officially into his administration. It's hard to judge one way or the other. I am concerned with Governor Morrissey's, some of his big priorities. The first one under hot debate is the elimination of mandatory vaccinations in schools. I think that's kind of an odd thing to given all of the problems that West Virginia faces. That seems to me to be an odd first priority. But I don't know, in terms of management styles and all that, who knows? I don't know.
Comes back to you, Michael. David, I'm sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, no worries. If Morrissey pays his taxes,
That's a tough crowd.
This is a very cynical crowd this morning.
I can't imagine where we got that.
We're giving Morrissey the benefit of the doubt. If he's showing up to work, if he pays his taxes, that's fundamentally a improvement over the predecessor. If we get some honesty about what our fiscal situation is in the state, that's also a benefit. So we're not being lied to. Some people missed Baby Dog. That's maybe Morrissey can get a bulldog for himself.
Don't diss Baby Dog.
I'm not dissing
Okay,
Baby Dog.
right.
Nobody disses Baby Dog. But maybe Morrissey can get a cat. I don't know. That could be his thing. But yeah, it's going to take a while for us to really appreciate or disappreciate Morrissey's management style versus Justice's. But honestly, the bar is so low that Morrissey would have to start digging now.
Mike comes back to you now for the final word.
Well, I strongly believe that Morrissey's going to be a much, much better governor, and what he's done so far some of it's controversial, but it shows that he's engaged. I mean, he's in the governor's office physically. He's working there. So I think it's going to be a big improvement over justice but the interesting thing will be how long will justice serve in the Senate, and if he withdraws early, what does Morrissey do? And there's a lot of people believe he'd appoint himself to the Senate seat. So it's hopefully he'll build up enough state government improvement program that before that happens.
We've got bonus issue time, and John seeded his issue earlier, so I'm going to go to John because we have about 8 minutes to get another issue in. John?
All right, I want to go back to the mandatory vaccines and vaccinations of kids. I have said here a number of times that the United States is unique to the degree that it's built on the idea, the concepts of freedom and liberty, which are themselves embodied, require trust in the government and in government systems. Over the course of the last decade, we've seen the emergence of lawfare, and we've seen the weaponization, I believe, of law enforcement agencies against the opponents of the previous administration. And all of this whittles away at trust. And the cherry on top of that awful sundae was the overreaction to COVID at the point where it became politicized. Early on, everybody was terrified of it. But then there came a point that we realized that kids really could go back to school, but then they didn't go back to school. You had the whole masking thing. We had all of this, the mandatory vaccinations, which is the nexus here. If you didn't get the vaccination, then you lost your job. Didn't matter what your technical expertise was, by the way. If you didn't get the shot, you didn't keep your job. So now we're in the place where the West Virginia legislature is saying that kids don't have to get. There's no mandatory vaccination anymore. That's the direction they're going, and they're couching this as personal liberty. And the other side of the argument is that no, science says that vaccinations for kids are really important. So I'm wondering, do you all see this as part of a continuum? Had COVID gone differently, had been handled more delicately, would we be seeing this distrust in the government's in public health systems in general?
By the way, there's an author who wrote a book called COVID Wars who's looked in all this. We're going to have him on the show. I think it's Monday, March the 10th. This is a fascinating topic to me. Joe, I'll begin with you because your daughter is a physician, and she posted earlier this week about dealing with measles cases for the first time.
Yeah, and really showing a lot of frustration with people coming into the ER not having taken care of themselves for any number of ways, elderly not getting the flu shot, or unvaccinated people, or people without the COVID shot, and then coming in tears and begging her to please do something when they haven't helped themselves. I understand, John, saying that, the foundation of society has been liberty and all that, but also we have a social compact in this country that we take care of each other and that we respect other people's space and we respect their safety and the well-being of others. And part of the program for getting vaccinations with children before they attend school was to protect the community at large, because you wanted to develop herd immunity. This is breaking down across this country because of these vaccination issues and the infantile response to vaccinations that the governing bodies want to acquiesce to. I mean, when I was a young kid, my mom said, "Don't eat that Milky Way, eat a banana," because that was better for me. And when you have all the studies coming out saying these vaccinations are the efficacy is undeniable, they're safe, they're important in terms of eradicating disease, and to say that, well, my liberty interest trumps all that, to me is just, I don't understand the logic behind that. And frankly, I was amazed to hear Senator Barrett say that, well, we should get rid of helmet laws too, and maybe the seatbelt rule should go because of liberty interest. Yet when people get hurt, they have to show up at the ER and not pay their bills, which we all pay for. So I'm very much concerned about the breakdown of the social compact that we have in the society. And I fear that this liberty interest concern is going to be taken way too far.
Larry Schultz.
Yes. I'll do something I did earlier in the show. So I guess now we're going to see the same foster kids Joe was talking about earlier, who are not being properly cared for by this state with the measles. And, polio could be back out there. We should probably ask Mitch McConnell what he thinks about that. That's
Mitch had polio.
It's not just a bad. Yeah, it's not just a bad idea. It's insane. It would be like saying, you don't need to have brakes on your car because it's a matter of personal freedom. And so we're not going to have car inspections. And if you're unable to stop your car, if the police pull you over when it breaks down and they realize you never had any brakes on it, they shouldn't be allowed to give you a ticket because you're just exercising your freedom. No, you're exercising danger to me if I'm on that road. So there are a lot of things that the government asks people to do every single day that you could couch them as an attack on freedoms, but what they really are is don't kill your neighbor. And that's not a freedom. You don't have the freedom to kill your neighbor. So this just sounds insane to me.
Mr. Valente.
There's a difference between liberty and libertine. Liberty has to have responsibility as its core concept. It has to be, you have to have responsibility to exercise liberty. Your right to throw a punch ends at my nose type deal. I think a lot of people think the word liberty and it's just, I can do whatever I want to. No, you have responsibilities to maintain whether it's decorum or not going out in public when you're sick as a dog, things like that to take care of yourself, to put on a damn helmet when you're riding a motorcycle, to buckle your seatbelt when you're in a car, because if you're in the back seat of a car, you have the right to not wear a seatbelt, but if you get launched forward and hit the person that's actually wearing a seatbelt in the front seat, you're not doing anyone any good. You're bringing harm to others. So we need to have, bring back the concept of responsibility for your actions, which I think we've lost. We also need to have a honest conversation about what happened with COVID. What worked? What didn't work? We have not had that.
Nope.
And
the United States had I think we were the worst safety record of any country when it came to COVID. In terms of
we didn't have, and we still refuse to do it because our political system is fundamentally flawed right now. We are more interested in raising money off of issues than actually dealing with issues. And that's what that's where I'm at with this issue, is we need to have a rational discussion.
Final thought back to you, JTG.
I'm auto-hypocritical on this issue. I cannot imagine not being vaccinated. I cannot imagine not having my kids be vaccinated. A safety engineer, I can't imagine being on a motorcycle, and I can't imagine being in a car without a seatbelt. However, I have telling somebody else that they have to, I have a little harder time with that. I understand it. I fall on the side of, yes, get everybody vaccinated, but I have a hard time justifying it on principle.
And on that note, we will do our final thoughts coming up in a second here. Good job, folks. We'll be right back. You got 8 seconds apiece out of the break here. Mr. Schultz.
Call your elected officials about your electric bill. Your elected officials about your electric bill.
Mr. Valente.
I'll go back to the hockey game. It was a fantastic game. I know a lot of people were disappointed with the result, but so looking forward to Olympic hockey next year in Cortina.
Mr. Carl.
Ears had a big win this week, and they need another one Saturday to get in the playoffs.
Mr. Valente. Mr. Gilstrap.
Hi there. How are you? Nice to meet you. Last night I watched Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Everybody needs to go watch that again.
Yes.
Also watch Idiocracy with Luke
Yes.
Wilson. Don't miss that one. Hey, Dave Ramsey Show is next. Have a great weekend. This is Talk Radio, WR Martinsburg and TV 10. We'll talk to you again in 70 short hours.